Have you ever noticed how the most organized people in life almost never make noise about it? They don't post planners on Instagram. They don't do live streams about productivity. They don't write endless lists of goals. They simply live. They flow. As if they have a secret the rest of the world doesn't know. And they do. Carl Jung said there's a type of silent organization that doesn't depend on apps, calendars, or external systems. It's a way of living that organizes your mind, your emotions, your relationships, and as a consequence, your entire life aligns itself. But here's what nobody tells you about this. It requires you to stop trying to control everything, to accept parts of yourself you've always rejected, to live your truth even when nobody approves. And that scares most people. That's why they keep chasing after one more method, one more technique, one more productivity guru. Meanwhile, a small group of people discovered these 11 psychological rules from Jung that almost nobody practices, and their lives changed completely. Today you're going to learn these 11 rules, and by the end of this video, you'll understand that you don't need to show off. You don't need approval from anyone. You just need to learn how to organize your life in silence, like an invisible force that transforms everything around you. So stay with me until the end, because after learning these rules, you'll never look at your life the same way again. Jung's first rule for organizing your life in silence might seem simple, but without it, the next ones become almost impossible to apply. Before trying to organize anything out there, you need to make peace with what's disorganized inside you. And this doesn't just mean accepting your flaws or embracing your qualities. It means looking directly at what you've always tried to hide, even from yourself. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow. The shadow isn't evil itself, but everything you've rejected as part of your identity. It's the impulses you consider unacceptable, the emotions you judge as inappropriate, the desires you don't dare confess even in the silence of your own room. When you don't integrate these rejected parts, they don't disappear. They stay there, in your unconscious, creating silent sabotage. They make you procrastinate when you most need to act. They lead you to choose exactly what's not good for you. They make you explode with anger over small things, or freeze in front of obvious opportunities. The unintegrated shadow is like having a criminal loose inside your house. He's going to show up at the most inconvenient times. That's why the first rule of inner organization is simple, but confrontational. Stop pretending you're only your good qualities. Acknowledge your shadow impulses too. Not to feed them, but to consciously choose what to do with them. When you stop wasting energy pretending to be perfect, you have much more energy left to be truthful. And truth, even when imperfect, always organizes better than a well-arranged lie. The person who accepts their shadow no longer needs to hide from themselves. And when you don't need to hide, you can finally focus on what really matters. This is the foundation of any lasting organization. Not absolute control over yourself, but radical honesty with yourself. The second rule Jung reveals to us goes against everything the modern world preaches about productivity. In a world that worships constant action, for Jung, true power lies in conscious stillness. Not in doing for the sake of doing, but in being present before acting. Most people live on autopilot. They wake up, check their phone, rush to work, solve problems, come home, watch something, sleep, and repeat. In this frantic pace, life happens to you, not through you. You react to external stimuli like a puppet on strings. Jung understood that this way of living generates deep disorganization. Because you never stop to ask if what you're doing makes sense, if you're going in the right direction, if your actions are aligned with your deepest values. Being present isn't esoteric meditation. It's simply this. Before doing anything important, you pause for a few seconds and ask, why am I doing this? What am I feeling right now? Is this action coming from a conscious place, or just from habit? Stephen Hawking once said that intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. But how can you consciously adapt if you're not even present to perceive what's changing? Being present is what allows you to navigate through life with intention, instead of just reacting to events. It's like the difference between driving a car while looking at the road or just following the car in front of you. When you're present, you can see the curves before they appear. You can anticipate, adjust, choose the best route. And this, applied to life, is what transforms chaos into organization. Because true organization isn't about having everything planned. It's about having enough clarity to make good decisions at the moment they need to be made. And that clarity only comes from presence. from the inner silence that allows you to hear your own wisdom before hearing the noise of the world. The third rule Jung teaches us is perhaps the most revolutionary. Stop trying to please everyone. Because when you live for others' approval, you're not organizing your life. You're organizing the expectations others have of you. And that's a prison disguised as virtue. Jung discovered that we have two main personalities. The ego, which is who you think you need to be accepted, and the self, which is who you really are when you stop performing. The problem is that most people are so busy feeding the ego that they never get to know the self. They live their entire lives as strangers to themselves. And then, life becomes a constant theatrical performance. You say yes when you want to say no. You smile when you're sad. You pretend interest in things that bore you. You accept invitations that drain you. You maintain relationships that diminish you. All to keep up the image of a good, balanced person who never bothers anyone. But there's a tremendous cost to this way of living. You lose contact with your own desires. You no longer know what really makes you happy. You can't identify your limits until they've already been crossed. And worse, you attract into your life people who are more interested in your performance than your truth. Inner organization begins when you decide that your authenticity is worth more than universal approval. This doesn't mean becoming an insensitive or selfish person. It means understanding that you can't give what you don't have. And if you don't have an honest relationship with yourself, you can't have honest relationships with anyone. When you stop trying to please everyone, something magical happens. The right people come closer, the wrong ones move away, and you finally have energy to invest in what really matters, instead of wasting your life force trying to be someone you're not. This is one of the deepest ways to organize your life. Because when you're aligned with your inner truth, decisions become easier, relationships become lighter. And you can finally live your own life, instead of living the life others expect you to live. Jung's fourth rule for organizing life in silence sounds almost contradictory, but it's profoundly liberating. Accept that not everything in your life can or should be controlled. In a culture obsessed with control and planning, this idea might seem like a recipe for chaos. But Jung discovered the opposite. He realized that the obsessive need to control everything is actually one of the biggest sources of inner disorganization. Because when you try to control the uncontrollable, you waste precious energy that could be used to influence what's actually within your reach. Think of it this way. There are three categories of things in your life. Those you can control completely, like your choices and reactions. Those you can influence, like some outcomes and relationships. And those that are completely beyond your reach, like others' behavior, the past, and many external events. The disorganized person spends most of their energy trying to control the third category. They become obsessed with what others will think, ruminating over past mistakes they can't change, worrying about future scenarios that might never happen. But the person who understands Jung's rule focuses all their energy on the first two categories, on what they can control and what they can influence. And regarding the rest, they accept it. Not out of resignation, but out of wisdom. Because accepting what you can't change isn't giving up. It's an intelligent energy management strategy. It's recognizing that you're powerful, but not omnipotent. And there's a huge difference between these two things. When you accept this limitation, paradoxically, you become more powerful. Because now, all your strength is concentrated where it can really make a difference. You no longer waste time fighting reality. You work with it. And this creates a natural organization in your life. Because you stop swimming against the current and learn to use its force to get where you want to go. This acceptance of the uncontrollable doesn't make you passive. It makes you strategic. And strategic people live much more organized lives than people who fight windmills. The fifth rule Jung offers us is about something the modern world has almost completely lost. The ability to be alone with yourself without feeling lonely. Jung called this creative solitude. And he said that a person who can't be comfortable with themselves can never truly organize their life, because they're always trying to escape from themselves. Have you noticed how people do everything to avoid silence? Music in their earphones all the time, TV on as background noise, social media to fill any vacant moment, purposeless conversations just to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. This happens because most people are afraid of what they'll find when everything gets quiet, afraid of the thoughts that appear, of the emotions that emerge, of the uncomfortable questions that arise. But Jung discovered that it's exactly in this silence where wisdom lives. It's in conscious solitude that you can hear your inner voice above the world's noise. It's when you're alone that you can process experiences, integrate learnings, and make decisions aligned with your truth. Creative solitude isn't social isolation. It's the ability to have interesting company when you're with yourself. It's transforming that time alone into something nourishing, regenerating, enlightening. Some of the most organized people you know have something in common. They have a healthy relationship with their own company. They don't need to always be busy or distracted to feel good. They can sit in silence and not feel anxiety. They can walk without music and enjoy their own thoughts. They can go without checking their phone and not feel like they're missing something. This ability to be comfortable with yourself is fundamental for any inner organization. Because it's in silence that you can distinguish between what's important and what's just noise. It's in solitude that you can connect with your true desires, not the desires the world has implanted in you. It's when you're alone that you can plan your life based on your own vision, not the vision others have for you. If you can't be comfortable alone, you'll always seek external distractions to fill the void. And a life based on distractions will never be an organized life. It will just be a well-structured escape. Jung's sixth rule for organizing life in silence is something that can completely change how you make decisions. Learn to distinguish between what you want and what you think you should want. This distinction is harder than it seems, because from childhood we're bombarded with external expectations about what constitutes a successful life. Society, family, friends, the media, everyone has an opinion about how you should live. And gradually, these opinions infiltrate your mind, and you begin to confuse them with your own desires. Jung called this an inauthentic life. It's when you're pursuing goals that aren't really yours. Working in a career that doesn't fulfill you, because it's what's expected. Maintaining relationships that drain you because it's socially acceptable. Buying things you don't need to impress people you don't even like. And the result is always the same. A constant feeling that something is missing. That you're living someone else's life. That no matter how much you achieve, you never feel truly satisfied. True life organization begins when you can separate your authentic desires from implanted desires. And this requires courage. Because you might discover that what you really want is very different from what everyone expects of you. Maybe you'll discover that you prefer a simpler life instead of a successful career. Maybe you'll discover that you value time more than money. Maybe you'll discover that your happiness doesn't depend on external approval. This discovery can be scary because it means you'll have to disappoint some people. You'll have to explain choices that seem strange to those living on social autopilot. You'll have to endure judgments and misunderstandings. But it also means you can finally live your own life. And an authentic life is always more organized than a performative life. Because when you're pursuing goals that truly make sense to you, motivation is natural. Effort doesn't feel forced. Decisions flow more easily because there's a clear internal criterion to evaluate them. When you know what you really want, organizing your life to achieve it stops being a sacrifice and becomes a pleasure. Because finally you're building something that's truly yours. Jung's seventh rule for a silently organized life is paradoxical, but essential. Accept that you are contradictory. That you carry within yourself seemingly incompatible aspects. And that this contradiction isn't a defect to be corrected, but a richness to be integrated. Jung discovered that we're all multiple. We have within us the rational and the emotional, the brave and the fearful, the generous and the selfish, the creative and the practical, the social and the solitary. Most people try to deny these contradictions. They choose one side and repress the other. They decide to always be rational and deny emotions. Or they identify only with kindness and reject any aggressive impulse. But Jung realized that this attempt to be one-dimensional generates deep disorganization, because the repressed parts don't disappear. They remain in the unconscious, creating internal conflicts, sabotage, and incomprehensible behaviors. The person who tries to always be rational suddenly explodes emotionally. The one who prides themselves on always being kind sometimes acts with a cruelty they themselves don't understand. The one who sees themselves as brave freezes in situations that would require a different kind of courage. True life organization doesn't come from eliminating contradictions, but from their conscious integration. It's accepting that you can be rational most of the time, but sometimes you'll need to follow intuition. That you can value harmony, but sometimes you'll need to enter conflict to defend something important. That you can enjoy company, but you also need solitude to regenerate. When you accept these different facets of yourself, you stop wasting energy fighting against parts of you. You stop feeling guilty when you act differently from your usual pattern. You stop being surprised by reactions that don't fit the image you have of yourself. And this acceptance creates a much more flexible and sustainable organization. Because you're no longer trying to force yourself to be a simplified version of yourself. You're learning to navigate the complexity of your own nature. And people who know themselves deeply, including their contradictions, make wiser decisions. Because they take into account all aspects of the situation, not just those that align with their preferred identity. The 8th rule Jung teaches us about organizing life in silence deals with something modern culture treats as weakness, but which is actually a tremendous source of strength. Honor your natural cycles. Accept that you're not a machine that can function at the same pace all the time. Jung observed that both nature and the human psyche function in cycles. There are moments of expansion and moments of contraction, periods of high energy and periods of withdrawal, phases of creation and phases of rest. And trying to force a constant state of productivity is violence against your own nature. Modern society has created the illusion that successful people maintain the same performance level all year round, that they wake up every day with the same motivation, that they never go through periods of low energy or questioning. But this isn't humanly possible. And trying to maintain this constant performance leads to burnout, anxiety, and ironically, disorganization. Because when you're constantly forcing yourself beyond your natural limits, you lose the ability to distinguish between what's truly important and what's just urgent. When you accept your natural cycles, you can plan your life accordingly. You can schedule more challenging projects for high-energy moments. You can use low-energy periods for reflection, planning, and more contemplative activities. You can recognize when you need rest without feeling guilty about it. This acceptance of natural cycles isn't an excuse for laziness. It's an intelligent energy management strategy. Just as an athlete alternates between intense training and recovery to maximize performance, you can alternate between periods of action and periods of regeneration to maximize your effectiveness in life. Truly organized people aren't those who maintain the same frantic pace all the time. They're those who know when to accelerate and when to slow down, who respect their rest needs as much as their conquest ambitions, who understand that sustainability is more important than intensity, and that a well-organized life is one that can be maintained long-term, not just a few months before collapsing from exhaustion. Jung's 9th rule for organizing life in silence is one of the most practical and transformative. Learn to say no without explaining. Don't justify yourself so much. Don't give 3 reasons when one is enough. Don't turn every boundary you set into a dissertation about why you have the right to set it. Jung understood that the excessive need to explain our no's reveals a deep insecurity about our right to have boundaries. As if we needed others' approval to take care of our own energy. As if our motives needed to be judged valid by an external tribunal before they could be respected. This compulsion to explain every choice is a subtle way of giving the power of your decisions to others. Because when you over-justify, you're implicitly saying that the other person has the right to accept or reject your reasons. You're turning your boundary into a negotiation where the other person can argue and try to convince you otherwise. A true no doesn't need elaborate justification. It just needs clarity and firmness. I can't help you with that today. I won't be able to participate in that event. That's not a good idea for me right now. Period. No drama, no guilt, no explanations that open space for questioning. This ability to say no without justifying is fundamental to keeping your life organized. Because when you have clarity about your boundaries and can communicate them directly, people around you learn to respect them. You stop attracting people who take advantage of your excessive availability. You stop overloading yourself with commitments that don't make sense for you. You stop living defensively, always explaining your choices. And this creates more space in your life for things that truly matter. Because the energy you spent justifying every no can now be invested in your own projects and relationships. Life organization isn't just about adding good things. It's also about removing unnecessary things. And you can only remove the unnecessary when you can say no without feeling guilty about it. The 10th rule Jung offers us for organizing life in silence is something that will completely transform how you deal with your mistakes and failures. Stop trying to be perfect and start being consistent. The pursuit of perfection is one of the biggest sources of inner disorganization that exists, because it creates an impossible standard that always results in frustration, and constant frustration leads to paralysis, procrastination, and eventually giving up. Jung observed that perfection is a neurosis, an obsession that prevents action instead of improving it. When you demand perfection from yourself, any imperfection becomes evidence of total failure. A small mistake invalidates all progress. A specific failure becomes proof of general incompetence. And this creates a vicious cycle where you're afraid to try because you're afraid to fail. Consistency, on the other hand, is a sustainable standard. It's about doing the best you can with what you have today. It's about maintaining movement, even when the result isn't ideal. It's about progressing imperfectly, instead of waiting for the perfect condition that never comes. A consistent person exercises 3 times a week, even when they don't feel like it. A perfectionist person waits to have time, disposition, and the ideal workout program before starting. A consistent person writes a few lines every day, even when they don't feel inspired. A perfectionist person waits for the moment of total inspiration and the genius idea. A consistent person keeps their house reasonably organized every day. A perfectionist person leaves everything messy until they have time for a complete and perfect cleaning. Consistency generates results because it works with reality, not against it. It recognizes that life is imperfect, that you have limitations, and that real progress happens through small actions repeated over time, not through sporadic grandiose gestures. When you embrace consistency instead of perfection, your life organizes itself naturally, because you stop postponing actions waiting for ideal conditions, because you stop sabotaging yourself every time you make a mistake, because you understand that true organization isn't about having everything under absolute control. It's about having clear direction and taking constant steps in that direction, even when the path isn't perfectly lit. Jung's 11th and final rule for organizing life in silence is perhaps the deepest of all. Live from your values, not from your emotions. This doesn't mean ignoring or repressing your feelings. It means not letting them be the only criterion for your important decisions. Jung realized that emotions are valuable information about our inner state, but they're not always reliable guides for action. Because emotions are transitory, can be influenced by external factors, and sometimes lead us in directions that go against our long-term interests. A person who lives only by emotions wakes up happy and makes promises they can't keep when motivation passes, feels anger and makes destructive decisions they later regret, feels fear and avoids opportunities that could transform their life, feels passion and commits to things that don't align with their deep values. Values, on the other hand, are more stable principles. They're what you believe in when you're calm and thinking clearly. They're the qualities you want to cultivate regardless of how you're feeling in the moment. They're the criteria you use to evaluate whether your actions are leading you toward who you want to be. When you live from values, your decisions become more consistent. You act with integrity even when you don't feel like it. You keep commitments even when other more attractive options arise. You treat people with respect even when they irritate you. You persist in important projects even when initial motivation diminishes. This doesn't mean becoming a rigid person without spontaneity. It means having an internal compass that guides you when emotions are confused. It means being able to trust yourself because you know your actions will be based on solid principles, not just momentary impulses. The deepest organization of life happens when there's coherence between what you value and how you act. When your daily choices reflect your most important values. When you don't need to constantly evaluate every decision because you have clear criteria to guide you. And when you live this way, a natural calm emerges. Because you're no longer in conflict with yourself. You're no longer living reactively. You're living intentionally. And an intentional life is always an organized life, even when it appears simple and unpretentious from the outside. These 11 rules from Jung aren't productivity techniques you apply for a few weeks and then abandon. They're life principles that, when deeply integrated, transform not just how you organize your activities, but how you organize your entire existence. True organization isn't about having a perfect schedule or an impeccable environment. It's about having inner clarity. It's about knowing yourself deeply enough to make aligned decisions. It's about having available energy because you don't waste it on internal conflicts, unnecessary justifications, or attempts to control the uncontrollable. When you apply these rules, something remarkable happens. Life begins to flow more naturally. You stop fighting against yourself and against reality. You stop trying to be someone you're not, or live a life that doesn't suit you. And paradoxically, by stopping forcing so much, you achieve much more. Because your energy is aligned, your actions are coherent, your goals are authentic. Jung said that life isn't a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. And when you organize your life based on these deep rules, you can finally experience that reality with presence, authenticity, and serenity. You stop always running after something and start living from something. From your inner truth, from your real values. From an organization that emerges from inside out, not from outside in. And if you want to accelerate this transformation process we're talking about here, I've prepared something special for you. My ebook, 21 Days of Transformation. In it, you'll find a practical method based on Jungian psychology to apply these concepts in your daily life. It's 21 days of exercises, reflections, and tools that will help you integrate your shadow, recognize your patterns, and start living more authentically. This ebook is a deep dive into your own psyche, with the necessary structure to support real changes. The link is in the first pinned comment of the video. If you decide to take this journey with me, know that it will be transformative. And if you felt there was something here you needed to hear, leave in the comments a simple phrase that shows you truly understood the message. Just write, "I choose to organize my life in silence." That way I'll know you stayed until the end, and that somehow this content touched something important in you. And if you want to continue exploring these deep paths of the psyche and self-knowledge, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Here, we continue exploring these inner territories that most people prefer to ignore, but which are exactly where true transformation lives. See you in the next video.